Hi everyone, Sandman here. This video is brought to you by a donation from Jim in Vancouver, and here's what he has to say. Hi Sandman, men have been raised since birth to marry for love. It doesn't matter if a woman is poor, my parents would often say. Men do this and they end up taking a dependent. Even when there are no kids in the mix, men still end up subsidizing a woman in their lives. Boys tend to be self-starters. Very few boys I know needed financial help from their parents. They find summer jobs, go to school, and start careers, largely on their own. Girls, on the other hand, don't generally have the same work ethic to begin with. They expect their parents to buy them a car or a cell phone, which also means paying the phone bill. They need all their school expenses paid as well. I've spoken to many parents who are frustrated because their daughter refuses to get a summer job to help pay for schooling. Instead, she wants to travel Europe with her friends, and of course, she'll need that paid for too. Many women remain dependents upon their parents until they find a man to support them, and often even afterwards. They just keep on taking. Women choose careers that do not require them to work outdoors or do any kind of hazardous work. Women prefer air conditioning, flexible hours, and they generally are against working away from home, such as in a work camp. Back in the 1970s, equal pay for equal work was the buzz phrase. Once that was attained, and rightly so, it then morphed into equal pay for work of equal value. Who would be the arbiter in charge of comparing a man's job to a woman's job in order to assess so-called pay equity? So why not do this between men's jobs as well? We should all get paid the same. A bunch of socialist bunk. Women hardly ever marry a man who makes less than they do, almost never. A female doctor doesn't marry a plumber, she marries a specialist. Why? Because since birth women have been told that they should find a rich man to marry. Someone who can buy them all the things that they would ever want. And if they get divorced, this thing called alimony kicks in, whereas the man has to keep her in the lifestyle that she's accustomed to. Yet society is also brainwashed to believe that women are somehow morally superior to men, when the opposite is actually true. Men marry for love, not money. Men are honest about their intentions and drives. For women, it is a game of lying and coercion. Could you please expound on some of these points for us? I love your show. You are providing essential insight to men everywhere. We need to stick together and support one another. Well, Jim, thanks for your donation and comments, and I'm sure I'm going to talk about a few different topics from what you had to say. First of all, it's not just young women that are dependent on their parents. I knew one woman and she was pretty much grown up, and yet her dad was paying half of her rent all the time. While she was living with her husband, he was also paying the other half. She was living for free and saving the money and basically put it in the bank and used it for vacations to places like Greece, Turkey, Japan, and the United States. She wasn't putting anything away for retirement, but instead spending all the free money that men gave her in her life. I'm talking about a grown woman in her 30s and 40s telling others how to live while living on other people's money. So in a way, her parents paid for her trips when she was younger and ended up paying for her trips when she was a lot older. I put a link in the description to a video called Dried Up Feminists Are Poor, Guess Who They Blame? They're finding in Australia that women over the age of 55 have half as much money saved for retirement that men do. This demographic of women is also becoming the fastest growing part of the homeless population. Women are now complaining that men have more money in retirement. It's obviously unfair and we need equality. I remember reading last year that this study showed that wealthier men in Western societies were actually outliving poor lower middle income women. Women couldn't deal with this fact either. Also, Jim, thanks for bringing up to my attention this equal pay for equal work slogan being changed to equal pay for work of equal value. I had no idea that was done. The question to ask is, who determines what has more value? The government, possibly. I think the new slogan you mentioned is all about tricking men into longer and harder work hours. Meanwhile, women get the same amount of pay for doing less. That's how communism works. You get paid based on position instead of performance. We all know that social justice warriors want to devalue male work and pay women more money even if they do less. There's nothing new about this. Of course, our gynocentric culture still promotes the idea that men should pretty much man up and support women. It's in the male DNA to do that. Also, of course, women don't marry a man that makes less money than they do. That goes against the laws of hypergamy. It's also not just about money when it comes to women and mate selection. I know wealthy plumbers and electricians, and even female doctors that make less money than they do, and they still won't date those guys, let alone marry them. They are looked down upon when it comes to status because, God forbid, they go out with their wealthy, successful friends and have to introduce their low-class husband, Pete the plumber, to their friends, while all the rest of them have successful doctor and banker husbands to boot. Just imagine the scandals to be spoken of while everyone eats their cream chicken. Men are told to man up and marry poor women and support them and improve their lives. But you never hear anything about a woman doing the same thing for a man. Things have always pretty much been like this, except in the past, a woman couldn't divorce you and take your kids and your stuff. Back then, women had duties and responsibilities and they couldn't weasel their way out of them with regards to the husband and children. Today, their responsibilities are to themselves and they aren't having as many kids and they aren't getting married. Also, wealthy guys in their 50s and 60s don't want to marry poor women over the age of 55. Imagine what's going to happen as more men go their own way and automation starts taking away the jobs of 55-year-old plus cat ladies. The cat food will be harder to come by, and the cats might eat her while she's sleeping. Just imagine what happens when half the women over 55 are unemployed. Some are homeless and they're now looking for a man to basically blame. I've said before that the government might actually force some sort of redistribution of wealth scheme from the privileged to the unprivileged. Males, and more specifically white and Asian males, being the most financially privileged, so therefore we might have to chip in to keep our troubled sisters from hitting the streets. Remember, if women are single in their 50s and 60s with no money, and their parents are dead, it's going to be the responsibility of the state to take care of them. And the state clearly doesn't want that. If the state doesn't find a way to solve this problem, then those women will use their remaining privilege of voting rights to vote in political parties that will give them a better lifestyle. If they elect governments to take from men to give to women, more men will stop producing. Or if they do earn more money, they'll convert it to gold, cash, or Bitcoin to avoid taxes. Here in Canada, the government is now looking at creating some sort of tax for gender. Right now, they're planning on going after small business corporations and taxing them more heavily. The majority of such businesses are currently held by men, so I'm guessing that men with small corporations will have to pay more tax. They're already going after so-called privileged male doctors and entrepreneurs here. The thing to remember is that the world is changing. This idea of women being dependent on men might have been the case while you were growing up and while I was growing up, Jim, but single-person households are making up the bulk of households here in Toronto, as I'm sure they are in Vancouver where you are as well. Men spend less money and they save more of it. The key to everything is to get those men married and divorced so that their spending power can be unlocked in order to create new debt and transfer the cash to women. If there are armies of men going their own way living debt-free, that's the last thing that the elites in our society want. Instead, they're interested in keeping the cash flowing to the poor so that they will continue to vote for their left-leaning politicians so that people can be further impoverished. Many men today are likely to own multiple properties and rent those out to women. Just look over at MGTOW and what he was doing. He bought an apartment and rented it out to a feminist while he enjoyed his MGTOW lifestyle, and I believe he sold that apartment just over a year ago. He has assets and was making money off of them, and the feminist woman didn't actually have anything. So as more men go their own way and automation expands, many women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond with little to no assets will be unemployable and no one will want them except perhaps beta male simps. But after a certain age, even the simps won't want them anymore. Either that or many of the simps will be in their 60s and 70s or dead. The second article I put in the description is from Australia, and it says that rising divorce rates are to blame for women being homeless and poor. But considering that 70% of divorces are initiated by women, they have only themselves to blame for that particular situation. Unfortunately, women are incapable of taking blame for their own actions. According to that article, it also says that charities are reporting a 44% increase in the number of older women seeking homelessness services in the last 5 years. They also say that the death of the partner is another reason for the suffering of these women. The problem is that women on average are a lot worse when it comes to delayed gratification and saving money for their retirement. So just as many Western state pension funds start to run dry, and marriage rates start falling, and robots start taking away jobs, that's when women become independent and empowered. They couldn't have picked the worst time to choose this. Men are expected to help women in sacrifice, but now men in the West are beginning to become herbivores or MGTOWs and choosing not to support women, but instead are now focusing on themselves. All of this reminds me of the story of the boy that cried wolf. He lied about being attacked by the wolf so many times that people stopped listening to him. And eventually when the wolf comes for the women, they will be ignored and the women will get swallowed up. The point is that if women lie all the time, eventually men won't believe them, even when they're telling the truth. According to the third link in the description to an interpretation of that story from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. If women complain about being oppressed and men figure out that it's all a lie, then when these women are in their 50s and 60s and beyond and are truly in poverty, men simply won't care to listen anymore. Of course, in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the character Garrick says that the real point of the story is that you should never tell the same lie twice, which is probably why women lie about almost everything. That way, if you catch them telling one lie, then the odds are pretty good you won't catch them in any others. But something tells me that this time women aren't lying. If they're old without any children or a husband or pension, and in Australia the rents and housing prices are astronomical, it's quite true that women could find themselves homeless and poor. In the not-so-distant future, even those 50-something women that want a job as a Walmart greeter will pretty much not have that option, as stores get rid of registers and security entirely, and all transactions are made with RFID chips. When women are young and their parents supply them with a car and phone, and the parents are helping them out, they're actually hurting them. The girls don't learn how to value money, and therefore, when they go out and look for men to date and possibly marry, they won't be able to value those men either. Women are terrible judges of value, and that's probably why they buy $1,000 purses and $500 pairs of shoes. Some people even say that men have issues with spending, but if that were really the case, why are there 80 to 90% of the stores and malls selling women-only goods? You're right, Jim, it's socialism, and you live in Vancouver, one of the most socialist cities in one of the most socialist provinces in Canada, one of the most socialist countries in the world. Let's just pray they don't introduce a BC bachelor's tax to help the women's in your province. Anyways, that's it for today. Thanks again, Jim, for your donation. Don't forget to smash the like button like Poverty Smashes Women Over 50. Bang the bell and check out the MGTOW mystery link. Please follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook to get tomorrow's video today. Subscribe to me on Minds.com to get the video for the day after tomorrow. Thanks for taking your daily dose of red pills. And remember, a red pill a day sends the homeless women away. So enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.